Boys, I did it. After 60 hours, tons of grinding, 19 failed relationships, and 2 Kentucky Fried Chicken chicken tenders, I finally finished playing Horse Breeding Simulator Game of the Year Edition. And yeah, the story was about as good as people say. I really like the part where the pink horse is revealed to be what, Luggo? That's a spoiler. You said you wouldn't spoil us. Wait, so you haven't beaten it yet? That must mean that you haven't gotten to the death scene with the sexually frustrated monkey. Ow!
Luggo, what the f are you doing? You gotta use spoiler tags. It is so simple. You gotta do it like this. Do it like that. It is so simple. Oh my god. You have to be a special kind of stupid if you had no idea how to use spoiler. You know what? I'm gonna start hitting people. I'm gonna start breaking shit.
Oh, okay. Hey, wait, how'd you know what we were talking about? Don't you live, like, across the country from me? Huh. Okay, anyway, like I was saying, I really like the part where he... Luggo, do you kiss your mother with that mouth? Stories can be very special. They can expose you to all sorts of different themes, give you characters to love, tons of entertainment, and after you're done experiencing one, they're just fun to discuss with other people as well. There's a reason why cinema has retained relevancy for so long. However, what I just said doesn't just apply to movies. It also applies to books. But more importantly, it also applies to video games. Yeah, time and time again, gaming has been proven to be a very effective method of storytelling. I can't tell you how many games I've played that, like, they're fun and all, but something about the plot really clicked with me and gave me such a memorable experience that I wouldn't trade for the world. I mean, heck, it doesn't even need to have a really good story. Just having a ton of awesome gameplay moments can leave me with such a wonderful, powerful feeling. Those feelings, however, could be significantly dampened if you knew too much about certain games ahead of time. If you were spoiled, per se. Going into a game blind is a blessing that I think some people take for granted. For a movie, it'd be really terrible to get spoiled. I think you all know what a spoiler is. It's basically having somebody tell you about a really big plot moment, perhaps a major twist in a film, before you actually watch it yourself. And if you ended up viewing that film later on, then that twist or big moment would be significantly less impactful because you already knew about it. Sometimes you can get spoiled because of some guy on the internet being a big poopy head. Other times, though, you can spoil yourself because you think you might not care about the media being talked about. But yeah, for a movie, you're primarily going to watch the film for the plot. Or maybe because it's funny, I don't know. But for a game, there's this tendency that I see certain folks have, including myself at times, to not really take a spoiler as a big deal. Sometimes, especially in the past, I'd get curious as to what the final boss of a game was, and I would literally just search it up with no hesitation whatsoever. And my justification would be, oh, well, I was never gonna play this game anyway. Almost every time I did that, I ended up playing that game later on. For example, Earthbound is pretty well known for a lot of weird moments nowadays. There's a ton of strange and outright creepy stuff that happens in that game, but the most famous example is the final boss. Quick little spoiler warning just in case if you somehow don't know about this part. Anyway, the final boss of Earthbound is this alien named Gygus. Now, from that brief description, you probably think you know what he looks like, but Gygus' form is literally unlike anything you'd ever expect, and to this day, I still don't think I can comprehend what he's supposed to look like. I wouldn't expect anything less from a product of childhood trauma. Paired with his disturbing dialogue and music, he's the cherry on top of this weird dish of a game. This abstract, creepy, but touching video game. Now keep in mind, this was in 1994, and I don't think that there was any video game boss quite like this. And sadly, I knew about this fight whenever I first played the game. Now, I still loved the game, I still loved the fight, and there was still plenty of other stuff for me to experience blind, but everything would have hit harder if I hadn't known about Gygus beforehand. And the things I said about it being a weird but heartfelt game also applies to Mother 3 as well. If you've managed to avoid everything regarding the plot about this one, then I envy you. I got spoiled for this one too. It's got a lot of wacky stuff like its predecessor, but they go really hard on those heart-wrenching and touching moments this time around. To the point that nobody can resist to talk about them online. And I mean, I can't blame them. Game's been unofficially translated for over a decade now, so everyone who wanted to play it probably already has. So beware, Mother 3 spoilers aren't really a taboo thing to talk about out in the open, so if you're still in the dark, then you might want to play the game sooner or later. For me personally though, those emotional scenes still hit hard even knowing about most of them ahead of time. It goes to show how top-notch the writing quality is. But hey, at least I've been lucky enough to play other modern examples of this kind of stuff and gotten to see their takes on this style. Yeah, honestly, I'd say half of the reason I've played games like Elisa and Omori is because I knew that they'd probably give me an experience similar to Earthbound, and I wanted to see what these stories had to offer. And also they looked fun. And let me tell you that with all of them, I was so happy to go in not knowing what happened. For Lisa, I had a few minor spoilers, but there were a ton of things I didn't know. The last hour or so of gameplay was a lot different than I thought it would be, and it literally haunted me and left me unable to sleep that night. And God knows that wouldn't have happened if I knew how the game ended beforehand. Anybody I've ever brought up Jimmy and the Pulsating Mask to always expresses intrigue over the game's title alone, and well, I can't blame them. Did a video about that game a year ago. You can watch that if you're interested, and don't worry, there are spoiler warnings for the really juicy stuff that game has to offer. You know, I feel really weird giving Jimbo so much attention. I didn't really think I'd talk about it that much. And the most recent example of this was Omori. The less I say about this one, the better. But what I will say is that I was pretty blessed to be as blind as I was going into this game. From the few tidbits I heard about it, I knew it'd be right up my alley considering my taste in gaming, so I avoided anything about the game so that I could have a pure experience. And let me tell you, that was so fulfilling. To give you an idea of how blind I was, all I knew about was the concept of the battle system and that the game had dark subject matter. That's literally it. I will talk about it in more depth in like a future countdown or something, but if you're even remotely interested in this game or it seems like your cup of tea, I highly encourage you to not spoil yourself. I mean, I don't even think it's the best thing ever, but spoiling it, well, I mean, it really will hurt your enjoyment of the game. I guess that kinda goes without saying at this point. I mean, what if you're playing a book? Yeah, a book game. What if you're playing a book game, a visual novel? Because visual novels are literally just reading and stuff. If you spoil one of those, then you've essentially given yourself no reason to play the game. See, if you spoil a game that has like a good story, then at least if it has fun gameplay as well, there's still a reason to play it yourself. When I first heard about Danganronpa, I thought it sounded dumb as fuck, and to be fair, it is, but I ended up watching countdown entries talking about certain spoiler-related things about the series. Thankfully, it never extended past the first game, but I knew how the 5th trial would play out, and I knew who the mastermind behind the Killing Game was. Granted, I didn't know who lived and survived, and I didn't know how the other trials played out, so I still enjoyed playing the game and came across several other twists and turns, but the endgame was hurt a lot, and that's pretty bad considering that the finale already isn't even that good to begin with. Fortunately, I avoided spoilers for the next 2 games, and needless to say, I had a lot more fun piecing together the big overarching mysteries because of that. For Ace Attorney, I only knew about the final culprits of the first game and Investigations 1. And to be honest, I don't really think that harms those games at all. Most of you Countdown veterans should know what I'm talking about here. Turnabout Goodbyes used to be talked about a lot online, specifically on a lot of hated characters lists due to the prosecutor of the case, Manfred von Karma, rustling a lot of PPs. But it's kinda weird because I watched those videos several years before actually playing the games myself, and even though I had a foggy idea as to how the case would play out, I still loved playing it. The first Ace Attorney game is too much fun. But that's only the first game. The other 2 in the original trilogy were pretty popular online as well, and that just makes me wonder what other stuff I could have missed out on. A Farewell My Turnabout and Justice for All is a very great case case, however, it's most certainly not a fun one. The contradictions you have to find throughout that case are very, very minor, and occasionally the punishments get really harsh for some reason. And if I had gotten spoiled on a certain aspect about the case years beforehand, then I wouldn't have been as engaged and more frustrated than anything. I used to not be interested in this series. I always just kind of wrote it off as one of those franchises I'd hear about but never actually become a fan of myself. So needless to say, I'm very happy that I decided to play them, read them for myself. I know some people will just watch a playthrough online, especially for the games that were or still aren't available outside of Japan, and it makes sense to do that since the gameplay in visual novels really only boils down to sometimes solving a puzzle or something. But I much prefer playing at my own pace and piecing little clues about the story or cases myself, and I don't think I could get that same feeling from watching someone else play. I only really do that with games that seem mildly interesting, but the gameplay looks really dull or outright bad. I think I'm beginning to get a little bit sidetracked. Anyway, something I've realized over the years is that regardless of whether or not I was spoiled on a game's story, I can at the very least still appreciate certain twists and turns that it takes. I mean, I can still have fun talking about them, but with that said, it'll definitely lose its impact. And you know, since we're kinda sorta talking about video games here, there's another avenue that can also be harmed by spoilers. On the surface, this might sound like the stupidest thing I've ever said, but yes, gameplay is subject to spoilers as well. All I ask is that you bear with me while I explain myself. Gameplay can be on the same level as story in terms of how much it can affect your experience. Personally, I like to avoid not just big spoilers, but even the little stuff, such as areas you visit throughout the game. Nowadays, when games are being marketed, developers like to show way too much stuff about the game, in my opinion. Like, they do a showcase and they're like, here's literally everything. Now honestly, it's really not that big of a deal, but I much prefer not knowing about various aspects of gameplay. Yes, I know, it sounds very stupid, but sometimes there's that one part or level in a game that really sticks out among all the other ones. Around the time Resident Evil Village came out, there was one area in particular that got a lot of coverage online. I mean, heck, some of my coworkers who hadn't even played the game were talking about it. Yeah, here's a minor spoiler warning real quick. Okay, so anyway, if you've heard about this game, you might have also heard about House Beneviento. And despite being a part of a horror series, Village is typically about as scary as realizing that you left your bedroom door unlocked on a lonely Saturday night. House Beneviento, on the other hand, focuses purely on horror and puzzle solving. It does a great job at unnerving you. As you progress throughout the area, you start seeing hallucinations, possibly. Whenever you're thrown into the dark, the tension's built up so much that it's beginning to boil over, and then all of a sudden you're greeted with a wet hot dog making baby noises! Real talk, this is one of the scariest moments in the entire series in my opinion. Its design, the sound effects, the music. And here's the thing, it's really easy not to get caught by the baby, but for some reason, even though I know exactly what to do, I'm always really scared whenever I get to this part, and I've played this game like 5 times. Boy, it sure would suck if you didn't play the game until 2 months after launch and everybody posted videos highlighting this segment online. Yeah, the amount of Resident Evil Village scary fetus baby videos I saw online were astounding. I'm glad that this part is recognized and so beloved, but that's almost kinda to its detriment. See, I was still really scared whenever I first saw this thing, but instead of my reaction being like, what in the, what, why, what, it was more so along the lines of, oh, yes! I still really like this segment though. This still could have been a hell of a lot scarier if I wasn't anticipating it. I know it sounds kinda dumb to be sensitive about spoilers for a game like this, but It really isn't. I've made it clear in the past that I love it when games get unexpectedly spooky. Being scared is a feeling like no other. Scary parts in games can be some of the most memorable parts of said games, and part of the reason why that's the case is because you might not see it coming. And when you know ahead of time that there's going to be a spooky wookie part, it takes a little bit away from the moment as a whole. Same goes when knowing about a weird level, or one with some sort of crazy gimmick to it that really makes it something special. So yeah, as stupid as it may sound, spoilers for Resident Evil, that's a no-no. Spoilers in Pokemon? Also a no-no. Heck, even in Mario, spoilers are a big deal. Remember whenever Odyssey came out? That game freaking blew my socks off. So many wonderful and magical moments that truly defined it. You think I would have been happy if I knew about the boss that was literally a f***ing or if I knew that the final level would be your mom's house? Does it sound stupid? Does it sound stupid to complain about spoilers in a Mario game? Because boy, it sure does to some people! As I've stated multiple times throughout this video, or at least once, spoilers are primarily spread via the internet. Lots of videos on YouTube talk about video games. Quite the bombshell, I'm aware. But I think we're all aware of that one dude who doesn't take spoilers into regard whenever uploading a video, or, I don't know, making a stupid tweet on Twitter. You're not a true Nintendo fan until you've come across one of those all bosses, no damage videos that are uploaded the same day the game the video is covering is released, and the thumbnail has every single boss on proud display for your viewing pleasure. I think I'll cause an absurd amount of mischief today. Ah, yes, I definitely wanted to see what the final boss looks like before reaching that part myself. Thank you so much, I appreciate it. And no, I'm not targeting one specific example, there are multiple people that do this. A part of the reason why they do this is probably preying on someone getting upset that they just got spoiled on a game they wanted to play while casually scrolling through YouTube. Then out of anger, they click on the video, giving it a view, and leave a comment expressing their displeasure towards the thumbnail, which adds even more interaction to the video, which means it will be likely to ride that algorithm and make the big bucks. I haven't had this happen in a long time, but it used to be that anytime a new Nintendo game came out, YouTube instantly became a landmine, and it was only a matter of time before one of these videos landed in your recommended tab. And I get it, knowing what the final boss of a game looks like isn't going to be the end of the world. But shut up. Kirby final bosses are freaking bangers. I don't want to see what the latest one looks like before I play the game myself. And I haven't gotten to have that blind experience since ever. Every Kirby final boss over the past decade has been spoiled for me. But the worst part about all of this is that occasionally you'd come across a dude suffering from severe brain rot who'd be like, ugh, just don't click on the videos. Okay, and? That doesn't help. I mean, at least you're not interacting with the video, but it's the thumbnail that's the issue. I don't think this needs explaining. I'm not against videos talking about spoilers. If that was the case, then I'd be a humongous hypocrite, but it's about knowing when is an appropriate time to put up a spoiler warning. Some of the most interesting game discussions I've had stem from talking about stuff that's spoiler related, like plot twists and the like. And I like it when countdowns get into spoiler territory because it makes for some really in-depth videos. But of course, if you're going to talk about that stuff, then obviously put a warning on there. And for the audience, if you ever see a spoiler warning for a game that you're even mildly interested in, then don't take it for granted. I'm guilty of this myself. Sometimes I'll watch a video and the person narrating it will put up a timestamp to avoid anything spoiler related. But I'm so bored and I want to watch more of their videos, so I just say to myself, I'll probably never play the game myself anyways. I mean, sure, there are some games that I won't play and won't mind knowing too much about, but there are too many games out there that, looking back on, I really would have enjoyed doing a blind playthrough of them myself. There's an alternate universe out there where 13-year-old Luggo was a huge Undertale and Doki Doki Literature Club fan. And it's probably for the better that we don't live in that one. It's not worth sacrificing what could be an unexpected, shocking, and impactful experience in a game for 5 minutes of entertainment from a part of a YouTube video that you could always come back and view at a later date. I don't know, maybe I sound like a moron. Maybe I sound like I'm making too big of a deal out of something that's really small in reality. I mean, if some video game gets spoiled for you, then it's not the end of the world, and you're not going to die. Probably. And it certainly won't make the game, the twist, the level, the moment, whatever it is, it won't be any worse, will it? But there will definitely be something that's missing, if you get what I mean. Let me wrap this video up with a personal story. At a time that will remain unspecified, I was home alone one afternoon finishing up this one game I'd been playing for a few days. The game in question has several revelations at the end, and tons of strange and unnerving occurrences. For 3 hours, I sat there alone in my room, just digging myself deeper and deeper into this hole, asking so many questions, and coming out with one of the most worthwhile experiences I've had with a game's plot. So imagine if I had spoiled this game's finale for myself. The tension would be gone, there'd be no more questions to be asked since I already knew the answers, and the uneasiness I felt from being alone wouldn't be as present either. Just thinking about that really bothers me. I mean, dude, that experience is something I wouldn't trade for the world. Sure, it doesn't ruin the game's plot, but it does take away from an experience that you could treasure forever. And yeah, that's not the only experience that I've had that was like that, so there are multiple opportunities to live through something like that, but I wouldn't want to give up a single one of them. One day I'll talk about what this specific moment is, but for now I'll leave you in the dark. Sometimes there are things that you should be left in the dark about.